The laughter hit me before the words did. Sharp, glittering, vicious. The kind of laughter people use when they've just witnessed something cruel and delicious and completely undeserved. I turned, slow and confused, just in time to see my new daughter-in-law, Bianca, lift her champagne flute like she was making a royal toast. Her diamond bracelet flashed under the chandeliers as she smirked, tilted her glass toward me, and said, loud enough for the entire reception hall to hear. And here comes the old and fat mother-in-law my husband is stuck with. The music didn't just soften, it died. Laughter exploded from her bridesmaids and her wealthy cousins, the sound echoing off the marble walls like a celebration of my humiliation. Phones shot into the air instantly, screens glowing like tiny, hungry eyes. I saw two teenagers zooming in on me, nudging each other, giggling. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, did she really just say that?" My body froze. My smile, so carefully maintained through the ceremony, collapsed. In that instant, my world tilted. 30 years of sacrifice, of raising a child alone, of scraping and working and saving so my son could stand here today in a custom suit I paid for, it all dissolved into that one ugly sentence. Old. Fat. Stuck with. Words that weren't just meant to hurt, they were meant to brand me. I stared at Bianca, still enthroned in her designer mermaid gown, her flawless makeup unmoving, her expression triumphant. She didn't even look drunk. She meant every syllable. My son, Ethan, my only child, stood beside her. He didn't speak. He didn't flinch. He didn't defend me. He just stared at his shoes like a boy caught misbehaving, not a grown man watching his mother be carved apart in public. The silence between us sliced deeper than Bianca's insult. A guest somewhere behind me muttered, "Did she really just say that about her mother-in-law?" Another whispered, "Maybe it's true. She looks kind of plain next to them." I felt heat rise behind my eyes, that stinging pressure of tears threatening to spill, but I refused to let a single one fall. Not here. Not in front of people who already believed I was less wealthy, less glamorous, less worthy of being part of this shiny, perfect family. My hand tightened around my clutch so hard, I felt the metal frame dig into my palm. Someone snickered. Someone else coughed awkwardly. The DJ pretended to fiddle with equipment to avoid making eye contact. Bianca lowered her glass with a satisfied little chuckle, as if she'd done something clever, something socially acceptable, not something cruel. She leaned into Ethan and said, loudly enough for half the room to hear, "Well, at least she made it through the ceremony without embarrassing us. That's a win." A win. My existence was a liability to her. My throat tightened. I opened my mouth. Maybe to speak, maybe to walk out, maybe to finally tell these people the truth about who I was, but before I could even breathe properly, something shifted. A wave of silence swept the hall again. But this time it wasn't because of me. It was because Bianca's father, Richard, had suddenly gone pale, so pale he looked like his soul had packed its bags and left him on the spot. His eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the entrance. I followed his gaze, turning slowly, confused, and then my breath caught. Standing at the doorway, framed by the soft gold lights of the reception hall, was a man I knew better than almost anyone. A man whose signature alone could tilt the global market. A man people begged for meetings with, prayed for favors from. My boss. My mentor. The billionaire CEO who trusted me to run everything when he traveled. He stepped into the room like he owned it, which, technically, he could have if he wanted to. Gasps fluttered through the hall. Richard's wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Because the man everyone else whispered about in awe, the billionaire they'd died to impress, was walking toward me. Toward the old and fat mother-in-law. And in that frozen, breathless moment, I knew nothing about my life, or my place in this wedding, would ever be the same again. The billionaire's shoes clicked against the marble, a measured sound that cut through the stunned silence. He smiled. Not the Hollywood kind, but a careful, knowing smile reserved for people who'd earned his respect. He scanned the room, nodded to a few folks he recognized, then stopped dead when his gaze landed on me. "Margaret," he said, like a man greeting an old friend. He crossed the room with the easy confidence of someone used to being welcomed and then paused, genuinely pleased. "I didn't expect you here tonight. It's wonderful to see you." The room exhaled as if it had been holding its breath for an hour. Murmurs started up, soft at first, then louder. "Is that? Isn't that Livingston's right hand?" Faces that had been flashing amusement at my expense shifted into expressions I couldn't immediately name: surprise, calculation, fear. Bianca's smirk faltered. Her laugh died. The bridesmaids exchanged quick looks, the kind people make when they realize a joke has suddenly become a very bad idea. Richard, Bianca's father, leaned forward as if to intercept the conversation, the practiced posture of a man who thought he could handle any social threat with a handshake and a name drop. "Mr. Livingston, what an honor," he started, voice brittle. The billionaire turned, extended a hand, and for the briefest second, the way he looked at me put every gossiping mouth in the room on notice. He didn't take Richard's hand first. He took mine. The handshake was firm, respectful, an unspoken recognition that the person standing before him mattered. "Margaret runs our operations in the Midwest," he told the room, casual as a weather report. "She's the reason we didn't fall apart last quarter." The words landed like a bell. Heads turned, phones aimed. The narrative that had been set, the plain, struggling mother-in-law, began to unravel in the space of a single sentence. Bianca's color drained. Her mother clutched her clutch, so tightly the clasp squeaked. Richard's smile, which had been practiced and broad a second before, collapsed into something thinner, almost transparent. He realized in the same heartbeat that the conversation he'd thought would boost him, introducing his family to a billionaire, had flipped. The woman he'd been subtly dismissing all night was not only known to this man, she was relied upon by him. The billionaire glanced at me with a small, private smile that said he knew more than he'd just announced. For a second, I felt the delicious, dangerous warmth of being seen, not for how I looked, but for what I'd earned. Their smiles had frozen because they'd just learned a truth that rearranged the social order of the room. I wasn't someone to be mocked. I was someone with power, influence, and the authority to make their comfortable lives very, very complicated. Just hours earlier, I had been standing beside my son in the quiet dressing suite of the church, feeling nothing but pride, the kind that fills your chest so completely you think it might bloom out of your skin. Ethan stood in front of the mirror, tugging nervously at his cufflinks. His father's cufflinks. The silver ones engraved with tiny initials, the ones I kept wrapped in velvet for 30 years, waiting for this moment. "Mom, are you sure?" he'd asked, his voice soft, uncertain. I placed the cufflinks into his palm gently, closing his fingers around them. "Yes," I whispered. "He'd want you to have these today." His eyes shone for a moment, a rare moment of vulnerability from a grown man who had spent the last few years trying to prove his independence. But beneath the pride was something else I didn't yet recognize. Distance. A subtle, invisible wall. One I had been too blinded by love to acknowledge. He looked handsome in his suit, the suit I paid for. Just like I had paid for the venue deposit, and the catering, and the photographer. And the floral arrangements Bianca insisted must include rare blush peonies flown in from Holland, or it won't feel elegant enough. Ethan tugged at his jacket again. "Bianca's family, they're all very particular about appearances," he murmured. I'd smiled, brushing invisible lint off his shoulder. "Appearances don't matter. What matters is love." He didn't look convinced. Hours earlier, I was the mother bride's dream of. I had ironed his shirt, pressed his suit, fixed his collar, told him he looked like the best parts of his father. I tucked a handwritten note into his pocket for him to read later, a note telling him how proud I was, how his father would have been too, and how I would always be here for him. I didn't yet know that being here for him was what Bianca hated most about me. The wedding morning had been beautiful, painfully so. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass. The violinist played softly. Guests whispered compliments about the decorations, Decorations I had funded entirely because Bianca's parents claimed to have last-minute liquidity issues. Bianca floated down the aisle like she was made of diamonds and entitlement. Her smile was polished. Her gown glittered. She didn't look at me once. I told myself it was nerves, that she'd warm up, that marriage would turn us into a family. Then came the first crack. At the photo session, the photographer arranged everyone in tears. Bianca glanced at me with a perfectly poised smile and said, "Let's keep the photos balanced, okay? Maybe Margaret can stand, toward the back." Toward the back. Like I was a decoration that clashed with the color scheme. Ethan didn't say a word, just gave me an apologetic smile, the kind a child gives when he's embarrassed by his mother. I felt a sting of something sharp, but I swallowed it. Today wasn't about me. The second crack came during the makeup session. While I sat quietly in a corner touching up my lipstick, Bianca's mother, immaculate, slender, dripping in gold, leaned over to her sister and whispered, not quietly enough, "Why didn't she get a dress more flattering? Poor thing. She's sweet, but she looks like she's trying too hard." I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. I had spent weeks saving for that dress. Skipped dinners out. Postponed a dentist appointment. All so I could look presentable beside their wealthy, polished family. I blinked away the heat behind my eyes and retouched my mascara. And still, I stayed hopeful. I told myself, it's just stress. Weddings make people say silly things. Ethan and Bianca love each other. I should try to love her too. And God help me, I did. I tried. When Bianca panicked about her veil, I fixed it. When her mother complained about the flower girls, I soothed her. When Ethan whispered, "Mom, just keep things smooth today," I nodded, swallowing the ache that came with his words. Just keep things smooth. As if I were the threat. As if I, the woman who'd raised him alone, was the one he feared would ruin his perfect day. I convinced myself I was overthinking. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the blow that was waiting at the reception. The chandeliers glowed. The music swelled. Guests clinked glasses. Laughter filled the air. I walked toward Ethan and Bianca with the warmest smile I could muster, ready to offer a congratulatory toast. Ready to step into this new family with humility and joy. And then Bianca lifted her champagne flute, turned toward her friends, and unleashed the words that shattered everything. And here comes the old and fat mother-in-law my husband is stuck with. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't nerves. It wasn't a joke. It was an execution. The final proof that what I had mistaken for tension was contempt. My heart splintered. And as her insult echoed across the hall, followed by laughter that felt like knives, I realized something soul-cracking. This wasn't a wedding. It was a stage. And I had just been cast as the clown. I thought that would be the worst moment of the night. I was wrong. Because fate was already walking through the double doors, in the form of a billionaire who called me his right hand. And everything that followed would change all of our lives forever. Humiliation doesn't start with the big blow. It begins quietly, like a hairline crack in a glass, until the pressure becomes too much and everything shatters at once. Looking back, the cracks had begun long before Bianca's champagne toast crucified me in front of 200 guests. I just hadn't wanted to see them, because hope is blinding. Because love for a child is blinding. Because I thought becoming a mother-in-law meant gaining a daughter, not an enemy. But Bianca had other intentions. 2 days before the wedding, I arrived early at the bridal suite holding a carefully wrapped gift, a hand-embroidered silk shawl that once belonged to Ethan's grandmother. I had restored it myself, stitch by stitch, over 3 months. Bianca didn't even touch it. She looked at the box, then at me, then forced a polite smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh. Vintage," she said, the word dipped in disdain. "How sweet." She handed the box to her maid of honor, without looking inside. Then she added, "We won't need anything old-looking for the ceremony photos, but thanks." The shawl that had survived 3 generations was tossed onto a chair like discarded laundry. Her bridesmaid snickered. I swallowed the sting. She's nervous, I told myself. Let it go. At the rehearsal, as I adjusted the hem of my emerald green gown, the one I'd saved for, the one I bought to look my best, Bianca's mother drifted over with a half-smile frozen on her face. "Oh, Margaret, dear," she cooed, eyes sweeping me from head to toe. "That dress is bold. Green can be difficult for some body types." "Some body types," her sister chimed in. "Do they make that shade in a more forgiving fabric?" Bianca hid a smirk behind her champagne flute. "Ethan?" He didn't hear or pretended not to. I pulled my shawl tighter around myself. The next day, during family pictures, I stepped forward naturally when the photographer called for parents of the groom. Bianca's eyes widened slightly, the way people look when a dog jumps on the couch unexpectedly. "Oh, Margaret," she said, waving a manicure hand. "Maybe you could stand a little to the left? The lighting is more flattering over there." More flattering? She had placed me beside a pillar, half hidden behind floral arrangements. The photographer hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but Bianca's smile was firm and fake. I obeyed. It was easier than making a scene. Bianca's family strutted around like royalty, boasting about their well-established company, about their long-standing networks. But when it came time to pay, they vanished behind excuses. Her father said, "We'll reimburse you for the catering once some pending funds clear." Her mother said, "We're handling the flowers, but the florist prefers if you process the payment."
Bianca?
She never mentioned money, just standards. "Ethan wants the best," she'd tell me. "He deserves it." And who did she think was paying for the best? I covered the $14,000 catering deposit, the $9,000 photography package, the $4,500 floral arches. Her parents arrived at the wedding dressed in labels worth more than the bouquet centerpieces, and not one word of gratitude passed their lips. Not one. The night before the wedding, I caught Ethan in the hallway and hugged him tightly. "You ready, sweetheart?" Instead of lighting up the way he used to, he shrugged. "Yeah, just don't overthink tomorrow, okay, Mom?" Bianca's family can be particular. Particular about what? He hesitated, and that hesitation was a dagger. "Just keep things smooth. Keep things smooth." As if I was the problem. As if I needed managing. I smiled, but something inside me cracked. At the reception before the toast, Bianca's bridesmaids huddled around her, whispering fervently. One said, not softly enough, "If she sits near the front, the photos will look uneven." Another giggled. "Maybe she can sit beside the DJ booth. Dimmer lighting is forgiving." Bianca playfully shushed them, but her eyes sparkled with enjoyment. When I approached to congratulate her, she gave me a bright, brittle smile. "Oh, Margaret, you made it. Good for you." Good. For you. Like attending my own son's wedding was an achievement. So when Bianca raised her glass and delivered her venomous toast. And here comes the old and fat mother-in-law my husband is stuck with. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't stress. It wasn't wine. It was the crescendo of contempt she'd been rehearsing since the day Ethan proposed. The laughter that erupted wasn't surprise. It was permission. Permission she'd earned through months of carefully curated superiority. Ethan's silence wasn't shock. It was compliance. The guest stares weren't confusion. They were confirmation. Every little disrespect, every dig, every accidental slight had led here, to my public execution in front of friends, family, and strangers. But Bianca miscalculated one thing.
She didn't know who I was.
She didn't know what I carried. She didn't know whose trust one commanded, or who had just walked into that room. And her real education was about to begin. Bianca's cruel toast was still hanging in the air, an ugly stain on what should have been my son's happiest day, when the entire room shifted. It wasn't the music, or the lighting, or even the awkward silence left in the wake of her insult. It was the man now walking toward me. Alexander Livingston. Billionaire.
Tycoon.
Visionary. And, without exaggeration, one of the most influential entrepreneurs in the world. A man whose handshake had the power to change corporate destinies. A man whose signature could raise or crush entire industries. A man people begged to meet, even for 30 seconds. And that man had come here to me. The whispers began immediately. Is that Alex Livingston? No way. Why would he be at this wedding? Who is he here for? Wait, is he walking toward her? Bianca's smirk dissolved into confusion. Her bridesmaids stared, as if watching a glitch in reality. Richard's face drained so quickly it was as though someone had unplugged his blood supply. Mr. Livingston reached me with a warm smile, one that radiated familiarity, trust, and something most people never received from him: respect. Margaret, he greeted, clasping my hand with both of his. You look lovely tonight. Lovely. Not old. Not fat. Not stuck. Lovely. I heard a soft gasp behind me. Someone dropped a fork. Bianca blinked, her lashes fluttering like she was trying to reset the scene. You know her, she blurted, her voice cracking. Mr. Livingston turned toward her, surprised. Of course I know her. Margaret is the backbone of my entire Midwest operations. Without her, our expansion would have collapsed. If the insult had cut me earlier, this moment stitched the wound closed with gold thread. He continued, addressing the stunned crowd, because of course the crowd was listening. She's not just an employee, he said proudly. She's one of the sharpest minds I've ever worked with. My right hand, my troubleshooter, my most trusted strategist. A hush swept through the ballroom. And then he delivered the line that would haunt Bianca's family for years. And I should thank all of you today, he added lightly, because if Margaret weren't part of this wedding, I wouldn't have shown up. Otherwise, I hate events like these. Bianca's mouth fell open. Richard swayed slightly. A woman in a sequin dress clutched her pearls like she'd witnessed the second coming. But Mr. Livingston wasn't done. He lowered his voice and spoke just to me, but loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. I've been meaning to discuss your share percentages, Margaret. We should finalize the transfer soon.
Preferably this week.
Your new numbers are substantial. Substantial. As in life-changing. As in the sort of wealth Bianca's family pretended to have, but didn't. Richard looked like he might faint. Bianca slowly turned toward her father with a silent, desperate plea in her eyes. Did you know? Did you know she was someone? He didn't respond. He couldn't. His entire face screamed panic. And at that moment, something inside me clicked. For years, I'd lived modestly, dressed simply, driven a 10-year-old car, chosen comfort over luxury, avoided flaunting what I had. People mistake modesty for weakness. People assume quietness means lack of power. But what they didn't know, what Bianca had never bothered to learn, was this. I own shares in 3 of Mr. Livingston's companies, and I have the authority to approve or deny major partnerships, including Richard's. He needed my signature on a pending merger. His company's survival depended on it. And the woman his daughter had just mocked, publicly, was the same woman who could dissolve their biggest contract before dessert was served. I hadn't planned revenge. I hadn't come here wearing armor. But when life hands you your enemies on a platter, sometimes you don't refuse the meal. Mr. Livingston squeezed my hand gently. We'll talk more on Monday, he said. Enjoy the wedding.
Try not to work tonight.
He winked and walked off to greet other business acquaintances, none of which interested him half as much as making sure I was okay. I stood there, still trembling from the whiplash of humiliation to revelation. And slowly, beautifully, the room began rearranging itself. People who had ignored me now smiled timidly. Guests who laughed at Bianca's insult now whispered apologies. A few approached cautiously, offering compliments on my dress, my hair, my glow. But none of them mattered. What mattered was the truth finally rising to the surface. I was not the embarrassment. I was not the burden. I was not the punchline. Asterisk, asterisk. I was the woman Bianca's family depended on without knowing it. And their education, their reckoning, their unraveling, was only just beginning. The air in the ballroom felt different, sharper, quieter. Like everyone had suddenly realized they were in the presence of a force they'd underestimated. A few minutes ago, I was an easy target. The old and fat mother-in-law they believed they could mock without consequence.
Now?
Now whispers curled around the room like smoke. Is she really his operations director? She is Cher's. Oh my God, her daughter-in-law insulted the wrong woman. But what mattered most was the shift happening right in front of me. Richard was sweating. His forehead glistened under the warm lights, his smile stretched too thin, his eyes darting between me and Mr. Livingston like he was begging for an escape route. His company's entire future depended on a partnership that required my approval. And suddenly, he knew it. He approached with a stiff, nervous laugh. Margaret, I didn't realize you work with Alex. You should have told us. What a wonderful surprise. His tone was eager, but his eyes were terrified. For years, this man had acted like I was inconvenient background noise. A decoration. A simple, unimportant woman who should stay quiet and out of the way. And now the power dynamic had flipped so hard he could barely stand still. I offered a polite smile, the same fake one Bianca had been giving me all day. Oh, Richard, I said softly, I didn't think my career was relevant to your family. He swallowed.
Hard.
And no, of course it's relevant. We're family now.
Family.
The word tasted sour. Before either of us could say more, Bianca swept in like a gust of designer perfume and panic. Margaret, she squealed, for the first time actually using my name instead of she or your mother. She grabbed my hands with both of hers. I can't believe you know Mr. Livingston. Why didn't you tell us? That's amazing. She looked over her shoulder to make sure guests were watching. They were, then added with a sweetness so artificial it could rot teeth. Mommy-in-law. You should have said something. I felt my eyebrow lift. Mommy-in-law. The same woman who laughed gleefully after calling me old and fat was now forcing herself into a hug I never invited. Her voice dripped desperation. Let's take a picture together, she insisted. Just the two of us. Something for the family album. She snapped her fingers at the photographer like he was a servant. He hesitated, clearly aware of the shift in power, and snapped the picture. Her smile was frantic. Mine was controlled. This was my moment. Not for revenge, not yet, but for power. I gently withdrew my hands from hers and said, calmly, Bianca, we'll talk next week. It was the gentlest sentence I could have chosen. But to her father, whose business rested on my signature, it sounded like a threat. Richard choked on his champagne.
Bianca blinked rapidly.
We can talk anytime. Tonight, even. Let's sit together. Next week, I repeated, my tone as smooth as silk but firm enough to leave no room for negotiation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. All it took was one strategic sentence. And the fear set in. As if summoned by their panic, Mr. Livingston returned. He greeted the couple politely, but you could see the difference in how he interacted with them compared to me.
Bianca gushed.
Richard groveled. Ethan finally found his voice and introduced himself like a fanboy. But Mr. Livingston only nodded curtly. Margaret, he said, ignoring Ethan's extended handshake. Don't forget, Monday morning, 8 a.m. We'll finalize the restructuring of partner companies. Partner companies. A phrase Richard understood too well. His eyes widened. His lips parted. He looked like he might faint, because he knew exactly what that restructuring meant for him. If I didn't speak up for his business, it wouldn't survive. And suddenly, the man who hadn't bothered thanking me for paying for half the wedding grasped that his daughter's insult might cost him millions. While everyone else floundered, Ethan pulled me aside, not out of concern, but out of irritation. Mom, he hissed under his breath. What are you doing? Bianca's really stressed right now. You're making things awkward. I stared at him.
Me?
Making things awkward? My voice was calm, but carried a tremor of disbelief. Your wife insulted me in front of the entire room. He waved a dismissive hand. It was a joke, Mom. Stop being sensitive. Sensitive. 30 years of sacrifices, sensitive. Paying for this entire wedding, sensitive. Being humiliated on camera, sensitive. My heart cracked in a new place altogether. Before I could respond, Bianca approached Ethan and whispered something into his ear. He gave her an apologetic glance and followed her like a well-trained pet. And that was when I realized something chilling. My son wasn't losing himself to love. He'd already lost himself to status, to shame, to insecurity.
And he was choosing them over me.
This time, the whispers weren't mocking. They were fearful. She's the billionaire's right hand. I heard she negotiates 8-figure deals. That family is done. She didn't deserve that insult. I bet she could destroy Richard's business overnight. People approached me cautiously, offering flattery and forced smiles. Suddenly, chairs were pulled out for me. Servers offered me champagne first. Old friends of the bride's family suddenly remembered my existence.
None of it mattered to me.
Respect born of fear isn't respect, it's survival.
But it mattered to them. Desperately.
Every few minutes, something else happens to shift the balance. Bianca's mother pulls her aside and hisses. You need to fix this. Do you realize what you've done? Richard stumbles through a fake apology. Margaret, weddings bring out odd behavior. Please don't take Bianca's joke seriously. Bianca posts a selfie with me captioned, Love my MIL. She didn't tag me. Guests keep glancing my way, waiting to see what I'll do next. But I didn't do anything. Not yet. Because consequences are more powerful when they arrive slowly, like a tide rising high enough to swallow everything. The real reckoning will come later, at Monday's meeting, where my signature will determine which companies thrive or collapse. But tonight, the seeds were planted. Their panic was beginning. Their reputations were trembling. Their futures were shifting. And all I had done was exist in the truth of my power. They had thrown their insult too early,
Too lightly.
too arrogantly. And now, bit by bit, the walls they built from wealth and privilege were starting to crumble. One look at their faces told me. They finally understood they insulted the wrong woman. And the night, their education, their unraveling, was just getting started. If Bianca's insult was a blade, and her family's hypocrisy the hand that swung it, then what happened next? What came from Ethan, my own flesh and blood, was the twist of that knife deeper into my spine. Because enemies you expect, strangers you can ignore, in-laws you can tolerate, but the betrayal of a child? That is a wound that bleeds in places no one can bandage. The wedding was shifting into late evening glow. Guests danced under swirls of soft amber light, laughter and clinking glasses echoing through the hall. But beneath all that noise ran a tension so thick it could be tasted, a buzzing awareness that the balance of the night had changed. I stood near the balcony doors, needing air, when Ethan found me. He approached with stiff shoulders and frustration written across his face. Not concern, not remorse, not even confusion. Only irritation. As though I had been the problem all night. Mom, he started sharply, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. What were you thinking back there? My heart thudded, painfully. What do you mean? He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. You know Bianca's sensitive. She's been stressed out for months planning this. Why would you respond that way to her joke? My breath caught. Respond? What response? Standing still and bleeding in front of 200 people? Ethan, I said carefully, your wife insulted me. Publicly. He shook his head. It was sarcasm. She didn't mean anything by it. And now her dad is worried about the deal. You made everything awkward. There it was again. Awkward. You made. Sensitive. Words he'd used before. Words that were beginning to reveal their true meaning. I swallowed hard. I didn't bring your boss to the wedding. I didn't know he would walk in. You could have downplayed it, he shot back. You didn't have to make it a big scene. Bianca thought you were trying to embarrass her. A scene. Embarrass her. I stared at my son, a grown man I'd raised through scraped knees and teenage breakdowns, through heartbreaks and homework, through nights when I worked double shifts just to keep the lights on, and realized he didn't see me anymore. Not as his anchor. Not as his mother. Not as the woman who had sacrificed decades for him. He saw me as a liability, and worse, as an obstacle to the life he wanted with his pristine, high-status bride. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Ethan, do you hear yourself?" She humiliated me. "Mom," he groaned, "Bianca already feels insecure around you. She thinks you judge her." I blinked. Judge her?
How?
He hesitated, and that hesitation was the beginning of everything unraveling. "Well, I mean, sometimes she says you look at her like she's not good enough." My chest tightened. "I've never said that." "I know, but your presence sometimes makes her uncomfortable. Your presence. Like I was a burden. A shadow ruining her spotlight." He continued, oblivious to the cracks forming in my heart. "And honestly, Mom, you can be overwhelming. You don't always realize when you're overstepping." Overstepping. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. When have I ever overstepped?
He sighed.
"Mom, please don't make this dramatic. It's just, sometimes you insert yourself too much." Bianca's family felt pressured. "You didn't have to pay for everything." I stared at him. "You didn't have to pay for everything." The words stung, deeply, violently, unfairly. "I paid because your in-laws refused to," I said softly. "I paid because you asked me to." He flinched, not out of guilt, but out of annoyance. Whatever. Bianca's family just wants space. They don't like feeling overshadowed. Overshadowed. By me? The woman they called old and fat. The woman they pretended was beneath them? Ethan took a step closer and delivered the blow that hollowed me out. "Mom, Bianca never felt comfortable around you because she thinks you make her look small. She says you're controlling. That you guilt trip me. That you cling."
Cling.
Controlling. Guilt trip. Words that had never lived in our home, not once in 30 years. My throat tightened. "Is that what you told her?" I whispered. He didn't answer. And in his silence, I heard the truth. It was subtle at first, the way his eyes darted away, the tightening of his jaw. But then everything clicked into place, puzzle pieces snapping into alignment with devastating clarity. He had painted me as controlling. He had exaggerated my involvement in his life. He had told Bianca's family I was clingy, overbearing, difficult, to make himself look stronger, more independent, less like the man who relied on his mother for everything. I felt the betrayal slice through me with surgical precision. "Ethan," my voice shook. "Why would you say those things about me?" He lowered his gaze. "I didn't mean them in a bad way. It just made things easier." Easier. My heartbreak hardened into something colder. "You've let them believe I'm some desperate, meddling widow, so they'd respect you more?" He swallowed. "Mom, please don't twist my words." "I don't need to twist anything," I said quietly. "You already twisted them yourself." "I told Bianca I got promoted," he continued, "but I didn't. I got demoted. And then I got fired." My stomach twisted. "When?" I asked, my voice barely a breath. 6 months ago." 6 months. All those brunches he said he couldn't attend because of meetings. All the evenings he claimed to work late. The reassurances that his career was on track. All of it lies. He ran a hand through his hair. "I've been pretending to go to work. I sit in cafes, libraries, anywhere. I didn't want Bianca to know. She said she couldn't be with someone who wasn't ambitious." He laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "She thinks I'm the successful one in this relationship." I wanted to cry for him. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to scream. But all I did was whisper, "Why didn't you come to me?" His lower lip trembled. I was ashamed. "And because of the things I told Bianca about you, I couldn't suddenly admit I needed you. She'd know I lied." He looked up at me, eyes wet now.
"Tu livet."
"There's more," he choked out. I felt the ground tilt again. What more could there be? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded stack of papers, creased, smudged, worn from being handled over and over. He held them out to me, hands shaking. "I used your name," he whispered. "Your credit. I forged your signature on a loan application. They approved it because of your history. If it defaults, it'll come back to you." My lungs stopped working. "You what?" "I didn't know what else to do," he cried. "I needed money fast, and the interest rates were lower if it was under your name. Bianca's family thinks we're financially stable. I couldn't let them know the truth before the wedding." His voice cracked. "I thought I'd pay it back before anyone found out. But then more bills came and
Mom, I'm drowning.
I thought marriage would fix it. I thought once I was part of Bianca's family, everything would get better. They made me feel like I had to keep up. My heart split open. Not from anger, not from betrayal, from the sheer weight of how lost he was. Lost in lies, lost in desperation, lost in the illusion of a life he couldn't afford. "And that's why," he whispered, wiping his eyes. "That's why I didn't defend you today." I felt something inside me freeze solid. "What does that have to do with any of this?" I asked softly. He exhaled shakily. "Because if I contradicted Bianca, if I said you weren't clingy or overbearing or complicated, then she'd realize everything I told her about you was a lie. And once she questioned that, she'd question everything else I told her." He lifted his hands helplessly. "Mom, I didn't defend you because I couldn't risk the truth coming out. I couldn't risk losing Bianca, or her status, or her family, or the life I built on lies." The corridor spun. "So you let her humiliate me," I whispered, "to protect the lies you told about me?" He nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
I need your help.
Please.
You always fix things. Always. Fix things. I felt myself drift backward, as though my spirit was detaching from my own body. He wanted me to fix the mess he made. Fix the consequences of his lies. Fix the damage he caused to my name, my pride, my dignity. He didn't see me as a mother. He saw me as a safety net. I steadied myself on the wall. Ethan watched me with desperate, pleading eyes, the same eyes he had as a child when he'd scraped his knees, broken toys, spilled milk. Except this time, it wasn't a toy he'd broken. It was my trust. It wasn't milk he spilled. It was my reputation. And it wasn't knees scraped. It was lives intertwined, futures risked, and debt, financial and emotional, piled so high it towered above both of us. I took a slow breath, and for the first time in my life, I felt something new settle inside me. A boundary, a limit, a line I'd never crossed before, but one I was finally ready to draw. I looked at my son, the little boy I'd raised, the man he'd become, the stranger standing before me, and realized with painful clarity, his confession wasn't the twist. The real twist was what I would do with the truth, asterisk asterisk, and the reckoning was about to begin. Confessions don't end the storm. They summon it. When Ethan finished speaking, the hallway felt unbearably small, the shadows thicker, the silence suffocating. His words still echoed between us, each one a shard of truth that had sliced away another piece of the boy I once knew.
Debt. Lies. Forgery. Shame.
Manipulation. A house of cards he'd built on unstable ground. And he'd used my name as the foundation. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Mom, please, say something." But there was nothing left to say. The reckoning had already begun. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I simply straightened my shoulders, met his trembling gaze, and walked back toward the reception hall. Because this wasn't the place for collapse. This was the place for truth. The ballroom glowed with warm lights and curated perfection, but under it all was a toxic current. Nervous glances, forced laughter, people waiting for the next dramatic beat of the night. And they didn't have to wait long. Bianca approached immediately, clutching her champagne like it was a life raft. Her face was tight, her mascara flaking at the corners from stress. "There you are," she exclaimed, trying to sound sweet. Everyone was wondering where you disappeared to. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a villain, not a monster, but a woman building her own life on illusions just like Ethan. Except her illusion had teeth, and it bit me first. Still, tonight wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about truth. Before I could respond, the ballroom doors swung open sharply. Richard stormed in from the lobby, his face drained of blood. His wife trailed behind him, pale and frantic. Richard froze in front of us, panting slightly. His hands trembled. "Bianca," he said, his voice strained. "We need to talk."
Now. Bianca frowned.
"Dad? What?" But before she could finish, he held up a thick envelope. Familiar, creased, painfully recognizable. The same envelope Ethan had handed me minutes earlier. My forged loan paperwork. My stomach dropped. Ethan staggered forward in horror. "Dav, no." But it was too late. Richard's voice cracked like a whip. "Is this real?" he demanded, waving the papers. "Ethan, did you really forge her signature? Did you really lie about your job? Did you really drag our businesses into a mess you created?" Everything stopped. Music, dancing, laughter. The ballroom froze in collective shock. Ethan's face crumpled. "Dad, please." Bianca snatched the papers from her father's hand, scanning them with trembling fingers. The color drained from her cheeks as she read. What is this?" she choked. "Ethan, tell me this isn't true." He opened his mouth, shut it, opened it again. No words came out. And then Bianca's voice rose, sharp and wounded. "You lied about your job?" No answer. "You lied about your salary?" Silence. "You used your mother's name for a loan?" He flinched. "And you blamed her for everything?" The ballroom murmured like a hive erupting. Phones lifted. Guests whispered fiercely. Someone gasped, "Oh my God, he forged his own mother's signature?"
Bianca staggered backward.
Her bridesmaids caught her elbows as she whispered, "You humiliated your mother because you were the failure?" Ethan broke. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he sobbed. I didn't know what else to do. I thought once we were married, things would get better. I thought your family would help." Richard exploded. "Help. You lied to us, to your wife, to everyone. You put MY company at risk." There it was. Not outrage for morality. Outrage for consequence. His business depended on Mr. Livingston. Mr. Livingston depended on me. And Ethan's scandal now threatened the entire financial relationship. Richard turned to me, desperation naked on his once superior face. "Margaret, please, we can fix this.
Just don't tell Alex.
Please." Bianca whirled on him, stunned. "You're worried about the deal right now?" His wife tugged on his sleeve. "Richard, stop." He ignored her. "Margaret, if Alex finds out my future son-in-law is a fraud..." I held up a hand.
Calm.
Controlled. Powerful. "Richard," I said softly. "He doesn't need to hear it from me." The room inhaled sharply. Because everyone knew. Truth that big never stays contained. Ethan collapsed to his knees, literally, grabbing at my dress hem with trembling hands. "Mom, please," he begged, tears streaking his face.
I'm sorry.
"I'm so sorry. I messed up. I know I did. Please help me. Please fix this. You always fix things." I gently removed his hands from my dress. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't pick him up. I didn't soothe him. I didn't say, "It's okay." Because it wasn't. "I can't fix this," I whispered. "Not this time." His breath shattered in his chest. He looked up at me like a drowning child watching the lifeboat drift away. "Mom." I shook my head. "You didn't just lie," I said. "You chose their version of me over the real one. And you let them destroy my dignity because the truth would have exposed yours." He sobbed harder. Bianca stepped away from him as if he were contagious. "You told me she was manipulative," she whispered. "That she tried to control you. That she guilt-tripped you. When you were the one lying the whole time." He reached toward her. "Bianca, please." She stepped back again.
No. No.
I don't know who I married. Bianca's parents stared at me with a new expression, not disdain, not superiority, not politeness.
Fear.
They finally understood that everything they thought they knew about me was wrong. The woman they mocked was the woman who held the keys to their future. Richard swallowed. Margaret, what happens now? I breathed slowly.
Calm.
Centered. Unshaken.
Consequences, I said. He winced.
The billionaire re-entered the ballroom at that exact moment, smiling warmly at me, oblivious to the drama brewing. Margaret, he called from across the room. Don't forget, Monday 8 sharp. We'll finalize the restructuring. And I'll need your notes on partner companies. Partner companies. Including Richard's. A visible tremor ran through him. Bianca's mother started to sob quietly. And Ethan looked like the walls of his life were collapsing around him. Because they were. The room faded into a distant hum as I stepped forward, not as a victim, not as a burden, not as the old and fat punchline they tried to reduce me to, but as myself, a woman with power, with dignity, with boundaries, with worth they failed to recognize until it was too late. I looked at my son. I love you, I said softly, but I won't save you from the fallout of your own choices. He cried harder. I turned to Richard. On Monday, I said, we'll discuss business. Not tonight. He nodded frantically, shoulders shaking. Bianca stared at her husband, her face a portrait of betrayal and disbelief. And for the first time all night, the room treated me exactly as I deserved. Not as someone to mock, but as someone to respect. The reckoning had begun, and there was still one final step left. My own quiet liberation. The wedding was still in motion, but the atmosphere had changed completely. What had once felt like a glittering celebration now pulsed with unease, muted conversations, stiff smiles, wandering eyes that no longer held amusement but caution, even reverence. Bianca stood trembling on the edge of the dance floor. Ethan remained on his knees, hands limp at his sides, staring at the shards of his unraveling life. Her parents hovered nearby, whispering frantically, trying to strategize a way out of a mess they no longer controlled.
And
for the first time that night, I felt no humiliation.
No anger.
No desperation to be accepted. Only clarity. A clarity so sharp it almost felt like peace. I took one last slow sweep of the ballroom, letting every detail settle in my memory. The chandeliers glowing like constellations. The murmured shock on guests' faces. The fragments of wilted peonies on the white marble floor. The bride's ruined makeup, streaked down her cheeks. My son's broken pride collecting at his feet. It was a surreal kind of symmetry, the mess of illusions collapsing around the very people who had tried to collapse me. I turned away from them all and walked toward the balcony again, needing air. Not to escape, but to savor the quiet strength rising inside me. The night was cool. The stars stretched lazily across the sky like a silent audience observing my transformation. Below, the city twinkled, unaware of the small earthquake that had just taken place in the heart of a wedding hall. Footsteps approached slowly. Not frantic ones. Not panicked ones. Measured. Respectful. I knew who it was without looking. Mr. Livingston stepped beside me, his hands folded behind him. Tough night? He asked gently. I exhaled a soft laugh. Tough, but necessary. He studied my face. You handled yourself with more grace than most CEOs I know. I smiled, a quiet, weary smile, the kind built from experience, not ego. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer. He nodded thoughtfully. On Monday, we'll go through everything together. Whatever needs fixing, we'll handle. But tonight, try to rest.
Rest.
The word felt foreign, but possible. For the first time in a long time possible. He gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze and returned inside, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the truth. The truth that had reshaped my place in this family. The truth that had shattered illusions. The truth that had freed me. I leaned on the railing and closed my eyes, letting the cool air wash over me. And somewhere behind me, drifting faintly through the open doors, I heard Bianca crying. I heard Richard arguing. I heard Ethan quietly, hopelessly pleading. But none of it pulled me anymore. Nothing tethered me. Not their approval. Not their insults. Not their expectations. Not even the son I had spent my whole life loving. Because tonight had shown me something essential, something I had lost beneath years of sacrifice. I was never the burden. I was the backbone. I was the foundation they built everything on. And they only realized it when it cracked. Asterisk, asterisk. I straightened up, inhaled deeply, and whispered to myself, to the woman who survived humiliation, betrayal, and revelation in a single night, I was never the problem. The stars seemed to glow brighter, as if acknowledging the truth. And this time, I opened my eyes, watching the city below pulse with possibility. I'm not rebuilding for them. I stepped away from the balcony, my heart steady, my spine tall, my worth unshakable. I'm rebuilding for me. And with that, I walked back into the ballroom, not to stay, but to leave on my terms. The final echo of the night wasn't Bianca's insult. It wasn't Ethan's lies. It wasn't Richard's panic. It was the quiet, undeniable truth. Power, once claimed, can never be taken back. And I claimed mine. Completely. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And share your own story in the comments. Your voice matters.